Not too long ago, at low tide, in a tide pool not too far away, scientist Sarah and her trusty son and sidekick Theo searched diligently for slyly camouflaged six-armed sea stars. Challenged by sharp rocks and slippery seaweed, the daring duo must find and capture their hidden quarry before the tide rises and the sea stars slip into the dark ocean depths. If the pair fail in their quest, the Sea Star experiment at the Ocean Science Discovery Lab cannot proceed. Shod in sharp rock shielding boots and armed with a fishnet, a plastic tub, and Theo's superpower sleuthing abilities to detect hidden sea stars, the two must navigate the myriad distractions posed by the abundance of tantalizing tide pool creatures. Amazing anemones, glistening gunnels, snazzy snails, incredible isopods, slug eggs galore, magnificent mussels and bountiful barnacles, alluring urchins, and an adorable baby sea star. Aww. Has Theo detected a six-armed sea star under a rock? Ka-ching! Scientist Sarah confirms that yes, Theo has located a six-armed sea star. Scientist Sarah replaces the rock just as she found it, thus ensuring that the tide pool creatures will once again be safely protected from sharp-eyed predators and feathered foes, and there will be no telltale traces that she and Theo have ever been there. Theo and scientist Sarah can now return to their not-so-secret lab on Muir Island, where they will put on their clever teacher and student disguises and forge ahead with their mission of bringing marine science enlightenment to students everywhere. Here we are back at the Ocean Science Discovery Lab. After our successful tide pooling day, we're going to be learning how scientists conduct experiments, and we get to conduct our own experiment using sea stars. So the first thing that scientists do when they're going to conduct an experiment is learn about everything they can about the subject they're studying. Our subject is sea stars, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about sea stars right now. The first thing you might be wondering is, why do I call them sea stars instead of starfish? Well, it's because they aren't fish. What do fish have, Theo?
Scales.
They've got scales, they've got fins, they've got bones. They've got a skeleton with a backbone, and each backbone is made up of a vertebra. Now this is a really big vertebra from a whale, but all backbones have these vertebrae in them. And so animals with backbones are called vertebrates, and that's what fish are, and we are vertebrates. And all these guys over here, even the dinosaurs, squirrels, turtles, birds, the marine mammals, our whales, geckos, all have backbones, all have bones. They're all called vertebrates. Now, animals without backbones, like our sea stars, are called invertebrates. They don't have any bones. And there's lots of invertebrates. They're both on land and on
Octopuses.
Octopuses. We have octopuses, squids, crabs, snails, sea cucumbers and sea slugs, sand dollars, clams.
Dragonflies.
Dragonflies are on land. Yep, lots of land invertebrates. What are land invertebrates? You showed a dragonfly.
Snail.
Snails, right. Snails, worms, slugs, butterflies, mosquitoes. Ladybugs, bees, beetles. So there's wasps, yeah. So all of those critters are invertebrates. They don't have a backbone or a bony skeleton like we do, or a fish does. So sea stars are invertebrates. We know that now. What else do we need to know? How about where they live? Where did you see sea stars?
Tide pools.
Tide pools. Can you think of anywhere else they might live?
Kelp forests.
They could live, yeah, in the bottom of kelp forests. As a matter of fact, sea stars can live just about anywhere. There's over 1,500 species of sea stars, and they're pretty much all over the oceans, from tropical warm waters all the way to the cold waters of Antarctica.
Are there sea stars in Hawaii?
There are sea stars in Hawaii. And they can go from the shallows of the tide pools to the very deep deeps, like over 6,000 feet deep. So they can be just about anywhere. Sand, rocks, pier pilings.
Sunken ships.
Sunken ships. They might even be on the Titanic. Let's see, so that's something else we've learned about sea stars. How about what they eat? Any ideas?
Like some small snails.
They can eat small snails.
Algae?
They can eat algae.
Yeah, they're small critters.
Small critters, yeah. So with all those different kinds of sea stars, they're going to be eating all different kinds of foods. They can be predators, catching snails or even sea cucumbers or crabs or whatever they can get their arms on. They can be scavengers, eating dead bits of animals off the ocean floor. They can eat seaweed and algae. They can even put their arms up in the current and grab plankton out from the current and eat that. Other kinds like to eat clams, prey on the clams and mussels. If you've ever tried to open up a live clam, you know it's stuck tight, really tight.
I tried to open up a live mussel.
Yeah, did you do it?
Yeah.
You got a live mussel open?
Yeah, I was like,
Wow, you're strong. Because they hold really tight. They don't want anybody to open them up and eat them. But a sea star can come along, wrap its arms around, sucker on with its tube feet, and pry that shell open a little bit. Now, sea stars do something really crazy with their stomachs. They can turn them inside out and stick them right out of their mouth. Now, a sea star's mouth is on its underside, right in the middle. So normally, if you see a sea star, it might be stuck on a rock like this. This is its top side. Flip it over, its mouth is right here. Now it can stick its stomach out, and when it's wrapped around a clam like this, it can stick its stomach out through its mouth, put it inside this clam, and start to digest the muscle tissue and everything that's inside this clam. And then it will pull that partially digested food back into its body through its mouth and digest it with a second stomach. So it actually has two stomachs. Really crazy. Okay, so now we know about how they eat. And I talked a little bit about tube feet holding on. So those tube feet help sea stars move and walk. Now again, we have bones, those vertebrates that we have bones with muscles attached that help move our arms and our legs, right? So the sea star, it doesn't have a skeleton like that. How does it move? Well, on a sea star, they've got a special little spot right on the top called a madreporite. Through that little spot, it's like a little sieve, the seawater can flow into it. And it works like a hydraulic system, like a water pressure system. And it can send seawater out to the arms and into those tiny little tube feet. And tube feet are like a water balloon. When you put water in a balloon and you squeeze one in, what happens to the other end, Theo?
it pops.
It kind of blows up, gets big, right? Expands. And if you let go, then it sucks back down. And that's the way tube feet work. That's how they can sucker onto things and stick. And they can actually move the sea star pretty quickly. Now that seawater coming into the sea star's body also helps it breathe. Now what do we use to breathe, Theo?
Lungs.
Lungs, our lungs. Yeah, we use our lungs, but sea stars don't have lungs. They take in the seawater through their madreporite, and the seawater flows through their tissues and they absorb the oxygen directly from the seawater. What else is cool about sea stars?
They have 5 eyes.
they do have eyes on the tips of their arms. Now, they're not like our eyes. They're really typically a little red spot, and they can see light and dark gradients. So maybe if a shadow passes overhead, or they're coming up to something, or a fish swims by, they can tell if something's there. But they can't really see it very well like you and I see things. Now, as you notice, sea stars have 5 arms, but they don't always have 5 arms. Some have 6, as we saw in the tide pool. We found lots of 6-armed sea stars.
30.
Some can have 30, some can even have more than 40 arms, but typically they have 5. And this is something they share with their cousins. So they're in a group called echinoderm. Now, I'm just gonna actually write that word, echinoderm. Have you ever heard this word derm, Theo? No. Some people are familiar with the word derm from the doctor called a dermatologist. They specialize in skin, issues with skin. So derm refers to skin. So we've got echinoderm. Echino is spiny, like a hedgehog, spiky, spiny skin. Now, this is a sand dollar skeleton, and this is usually how you see sand dollars washed up on the beach. But when they're alive, they're covered with short little spines. Sea star relatives you might see are sea cucumbers. Now, are sea cucumbers spiky? No, they're squishy. They look really bumpy.
They look really spiky.
They look spiky, but they're just bumpy. And they have tube feet, though, and so do sand dollars, and so do urchins, and the other echinoderms do as well. Now, when you looked at this sand dollar, you can see a pattern on it. Looks just like a sea star, doesn't it? 5. And this 5 pattern is something that they share in echinoderms. 5 arms. And if you look closely at a sea urchin skeleton, you can see a pattern of 5 in that. And if you slice open a sea cucumber, you'll find that it has 5 bands of muscle in it. Let's talk a little bit about symmetry. Come here, Theo. Why don't you stand right here? Now, if I draw a line from the top of Theo's head, down his nose, through his chin, right down the center of his body, and then if I were to fold him in half, one side would look just like the other, it'd be a mirror image. So symmetry is when one side has a mirror image of another. And in human beings, or say even like this bird, this eagle, if you divided it down and folded it in half, one side looks like the other, and that's called bilateral symmetry. Bi meaning 2. So with a sea star, how would you divide this in half to have mirror image? Think you can do that, Theo?
Yeah.
Okay. So start from one tip of one arm and see where you go. If you're gonna cut it in half to make 2 sides match.
It's cut in half.
Yeah, that's really good. So that's some symmetry there. Can you see another way you could do that? Not so sure. But you took your line and you drew it to here, then it would match. So knowing that, do you see another way? Where would it go? Can you finish it? Yeah, right between the arms. Okay, we've got 3. Now what do you think? Do you think you can find 2 more even? What if I start this one? Right? There's 4. And so a sea star has 5 lines of symmetry. You've probably learned about a shape called a pentagon that has how many sides? 5. So a sea star has penta-radial symmetry. Radial like the spokes on a bicycle. So another cool thing about sea stars is that they can regenerate their arms. So say sea otter comes by and wants to eat a sea star, grabs that sea star, nibbles on its leg, the sea star can actually drop that arm that the sea otter is nibbling on. And then it can grow a new one back. You can see this sea star is starting to grow back another arm. And it'll eventually get as big as the other ones. You wanna hold this guy? Okay. This one? Yeah, it's kind of bumpy. How does it feel? Slimy?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of soft, kind of spiky too though, huh?
Yeah.
So from here, we are going to do what scientists do next, which is think about a question they want to ask, what their experiment is going to be. So the question that we're going to ask today is, what kind of sea star turns over fastest? What size of sea star turns over fastest? Now when I say turns over, what happens, say, when that sea otter grabs a sea star to eat and then drops it, that sea star might end up upside down on the bottom, and it wants to flip over. So it can do that by bending its arms and grabbing a hold with its tube feet and slowly turning itself back up the right way. Sea stars take different amounts of time to do this. Yeah, I know. Here, we can move it over here so everybody can see how fast it's walking. So this is one of our 6-armed sea stars, and it is walking around using its tube feet, sucking on to the side of the bowl and cruising around. So if this guy was turned over upside down, do you think it would turn over faster or slower than, say, this big sea star? You think that the 6-arm turns over faster than that one? Why do you think that would be?
Well, because that one's heavier. It takes, and the heavier you are, it takes more time to turn around.
Aha, so the big sea star's heavier, it's got more weight to turn over, so it would take longer. That is your prediction. And as scientists, we call that a hypothesis. We say the modeled sea star, which is what this kind is, will take longer to turn over than the 6-armed sea star. Now, we're going to ask a second question. If you had a whole bunch of 6-armed sea stars and a whole bunch of these modeled sea stars, you would probably notice that some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller.
Bigger. Same reason why that one would change slower, because they're heavier.
Okay, that's your second hypothesis, that bigger sea stars take longer than smaller sea stars to turn over because they're heavier. All right, so now we've got our question. How would a scientist answer that question? Well, they've got to come up with a way to test it. How can we test this? Well, we will take our sea stars and we're going to flip them over and use a timer to time them to see how quickly they turn over. Not yet though. And then to figure out the size, if indeed bigger sea stars take longer, we're going to have to measure them. So we want to think about our methods here. We need a timer for timing, and then we're going to need a ruler to measure. And because we're scientists, and scientists the world over use the metric system, we are going to be measuring using the metric system. So Theo, when you're measuring length in the metric system, do you know what units you use?
Centimeters?
Centimeters, right. So if you're measuring small things, centimeters work. Millimeters are for really tiny things. And if you're measuring something really big, you could use meters. Of course, we don't have a really big sea star in here, which is good. We don't want a meter-sized sea star in our lab. So we're going to be using our ruler, and if you have a ruler that has centimeters, that will come in very handy. And also, if you have a pretend sea star to measure, that also will come in very handy because we are going to practice our methods first. And that's what scientists often do, is practice what they're going to do in their experiments so they get it right when they do it the first time. Now, scientists take lots of measurements of whatever they're studying. That's the way they learn about it. And today we're going to be measuring our 2 sea stars. But normally we would have lots of sea stars in the lab, and we would take measurements of these other sea stars, because the more numbers you have, the more subjects you have to study, the better picture you get. So if you're only looking at one thing, it might not be quite the right picture. You might have the fastest sea star in the world, when in reality, these kind of sea stars are usually kind of slow. So the more sea stars we can have, the better picture we can get and answer our question more clearly. So we've actually measured some more of these sea stars and gathered the data, but we will just be showing you how to measure these two right now. Okay, Theo, let's practice. Okay, we've got our pretend sea star here. We're going to flip it over and we see the mouth. Yep. You are going to take your ruler and you're going to look at it, and you see on one side of the ruler there's centimeters and there are inches. So which side are we using, centimeters or inches?
Centimeters.
Centimeters, that's right. Now we see a whole bunch of numbers. Those are the centimeter numbers, and in between there's little smaller lines. Do you know what those smaller lines measure?
Millimeters.
Millimeters, that's right. So in between the centimeter lines, you see millimeters. Do you know how many millimeters there is in 1 centimeter? There's 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So in between each of these numbers, there's 10 millimeters to make up the centimeter. Now right here at the very end is our 0 point. Now it doesn't have a 0 on my ruler. It says there's a 1 there, but we are going to put the 0 line right at the mouth of the sea star. You want to try that, Theo? There's the mouth. Okay. And then to measure how long this arm is, you want to move this right to the tip. Now we're looking at this sea star arm, and what's the closest centimeter number you see to the tip of the arm?
9.
9, yeah. We see it goes beyond 9. Can you count the millimeter marks and see how many millimeters it goes beyond 9?
So 8.
We'll say 8. So what would that measurement be? It would be 9.8. So that means 9 centimeters, 8 millimeters, which we read 9.8 centimeters. Now, here's another question for you. If you're measuring an arm, if it was exactly on the 9 and there were no millimeters, do you know how you'd write that?
9.0.
Exactly. 9.0. So 9 centimeters, 0 millimeters. That helps us be more precise. We want to be as precise as we can. So we know that there's no millimeters here. It's 9.0 exactly. All right, next we're going to measure our live sea stars, and we're going to be writing our measurements down. So when scientists collect data, they always want to record it. They write it down and put it into their computer. So we have our data sheet, and some of you might have this data sheet. You can get a pencil and a ruler, and you don't have a sea star at home, I'm guessing. So you can write down the measurements that Theo gets. Now after we pick up our sea star, we're going to flip it over and measure it, and then we'll drop it back down and start our timer to see how long it takes. If you've got like a timer on your iPad or some other kind of timer, you can also time along with us. We're going to start our experiment here. One of the first things we're going to do is label our sea stars so we know which one's which, and anybody else who comes into this lab will know what's in our tanks. Scientists always label their tanks or their bottles or whatever they have so that not only do they know what's in their tank or bottle, but anybody else coming in knows. Because say this was filled with, I don't know, vinegar instead of seawater, or something like bleach that could be dangerous, you'd want everybody to know that that's what's in there. So we're going to label our tanks with what's in here, which is our seawater and our 6-arm and our mottled. So can you write 6-arm on one of these pieces of tape? Okay, and then can you write the word mottled on this one?
Mottled.
Mottled means kind of patchy colors. Okay, and then we'll put this label. Okay, ready to measure? Got your ruler?
Yeah.
Okay, you hold your ruler. I'm going to get the sea star. So remember where its mouth is? Right in the middle. Okay, where do you start measuring from? You want to use your 0 point on your, flip your, yep, there's 0, the 0 line right in the middle of its mouth to the tip of its arm. You might have to bend it a little bit. What number do you think that is?
11.
And how many millimeters?
4.
11.4. First measurement. Okay, let's do another arm. Okay, so we got our measurements. Next, we're gonna wanna time it. So, you've got your stopwatch. And if you're watching out here, you can time it with something that you have too. So we're gonna put it in upside down. Now when Theo lets go and it hits the bottom, I've started my timer.
What is it like right now?
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm upside down. I wanna turn over. Better get my tube feet out and stick onto something. Now while we're waiting for this one to turn over, we're gonna measure our 6-armed sea star.
Are they boy or girl sea star?
We don't know. It's really hard to tell on a sea star. So here's our 6-armed sea star, and we're gonna flip it over and get your ruler ready. And try to get it right in the middle at its mouth. Okay. What do we have for our first arm?
It's 3.4.
Okay, 3.4. Let's move on to our next arm.
I think it's just 3 maybe.
3, and how do we write that?
It's 0.0.
0.0, 3.0. Why don't you come over here?
Look, it's tube.
Oh yeah.
They're sticking out.
Yep, it's waving its tube feet around looking for something to grab a hold of. Okay, let's put this one in and see. We'll set it over here. It's got its own timer. And they're going. Now while we're waiting for these to turn over, let's figure out something here. Now we want to know how big these sea stars are, and we just measured their arms. We've got a whole bunch of different measurements, but we want to find the average length of an arm. Now an average will tell us kind of what the typical size of an arm is. So in order to figure that out, we add up all of our numbers, the measurements we took, and divide them by the number of measurements. So I would like you to add up these numbers right here. Equals
19.2.
19.2.
That one's
I know, you want
making
to
progress.
look? We might have to get our stopwatch ready to stop. It's going so fast.
Jeez, dude. Okay, it's
Look at it flipping right over.
It's almost there. It's almost there. It's almost.
And it's all of its arms touching. What do you think?
Yep.
The down?
Stop.
Stop. Okay. So let's write this time down for the 6-arm. 3 minutes,
And 34 seconds.
34 seconds. Put that right here. Now while we're still waiting for model sea star, we can add up its arm lengths.
70.
Yep, 70 centimeters.
He's still.
Still
It's
working.
pretty slow, that guy.
It is.
Mine is
slow.
right.
Yeah. All right, well, let's continue finding our average. Now we just have to wait for our mottled sea star to turn over?
It's gonna take a while.
It might take a while, yeah. What do you think? So, who was faster and who was slower?
That was way faster.
Yeah, six arm was way faster.
That was way slower.
That was your hypothesis. So now we've got measurements for six arm and mottled. The average length of a six arm sea star arm is how much?
3.2.
Centimeters, yep. And what's the average length of this mottled sea star?
14.0 centimeters.
14.0 centimeters. Now we've got basically this one data set of numbers for one six-armed sea star and one mottled sea star. Now we know we really should have more numbers to get a clearer picture of how fast these sea stars turn over and how much size makes a difference. So in previous years, we have a classroom full of students here from different schools measuring a whole bunch of sea stars. And then we have more numbers to work with. So we've taken some of those numbers to use today to combine with our two sea stars. Now, we want to get a picture of what we've just measured to help us answer our questions. And in order to do that, we make a graph. So the numbers that we're going to put in our graph are going to be on these sheets here. So Theo, why don't you write in what the length of the sea star arms were? So even just looking at our two tables, we kind of get a picture a little bit. We can see a range in length for mottled sea star. We had a smaller one that was just 7 centimeters and 4 millimeters, all the way up to one that was 14 centimeters and 6 millimeters, so even bigger than our slow one. And a whole range of turnover times. We had one pretty fast.
Yeah.
What was that?
4 minutes and 3 seconds.
Yeah, that was
one of those?
really fast. It was a mottled sea star, same kind of sea star. And then we had some that took a long time. This one we had today, 22 minutes. Yeah. And let's see, what was it with our six arms in this other year? Looks like this six-armed sea star we had, was it bigger or smaller than these guys?
Bigger.
Bigger, yeah. This one was the biggest. We had some really small ones this year, 1.1 centimeters.
Yeah, and that's probably why they turned over quicker.
And these, what was the range here? We had one that was as fast as
1 minute and 43 seconds.
Wow. And then as slow as the one we had today was actually slower than these other ones. We are going to have the director of the Ocean Science Discovery Lab, Switgard Dusterlo, help Theo graph these numbers and answer his questions and see if his hypotheses were correct.
Okay, now we're going to do a summary for our sea star unit today. And for our summary, we are going to do a data analysis. So in every scientific experiment, once you have collected all your data, you then do an analysis. And to do this, we are going to put all our numbers that we have in the tables now, and basically make a picture of the numbers, because that helps us see trends and patterns that happened during our experiment. The picture of numbers is called a graph. So you may have seen different types of charts in school before. Maybe you have seen something called a histogram, a bar graph. Those are the same thing, where you have a little bar for everything you're trying to show. Or maybe you have seen a pie chart before. That's where you have a little circle and then sections of the circle describe what you're looking at. Today we are going to use a scatter plot. It's called an XY scatter plot. And we will put on our graph all the different sea stars that we have measured, the data that we have from those sea stars. So everybody can now pick 2 colors. And Theo, have you already picked your 2 colors? Theo picked green and pink. Which one is supposed to be green? The 6-arm or the mottled sea star?
6-arm.
The 6-arm will be green. So I'm going to put that in my legend here and say green is the 6-arm sea star. And then pink
It's the mottled sea star.
will be the mottled. Now you can use any colors you want to, but every data point for 6-arm sea stars should be one color, and every data point for the mottled sea stars, should be in the other color. Okay, we have 2 axes on our graph. Do you happen to know what we call these axes of a graph? This one is the x-axis, and this one is the y-axis. That's why it's called an XY scatter plot. And there's a little thing that you can use to help you remember which one is the y-axis. When you draw a Y, you can make it with a line going up and down, right? A vertical line, and the vertical axis is the y-axis. So that's a little way to help you remember that. Our x-axis is time, and our y-axis is length, or arm length. And I'll write that here. Now I go to my data, I take my data table, and I'm going to start with a 6-arm sea star. So I'm just using my green pen now. And I will start with the first number of the data that we had from the previous experiment. Theo is going to put in his own sea star here later. So this number, can you read that to me?
2.1.
So 2.1 is the length of that sea star. I will start on my y-axis and go up for 2 centimeters. And now I don't have millimeters on my graph here. So I'm going to have to estimate a little bit where 0.1 is between 2 and 3. Remember, there are 10 millimeters in each centimeter. So I'm going to have to go 1/10 between the 2 and the 3. So I'm going 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, and 1/10 of a centimeter, this far up. And now would you tell me how long that sea star took to turn over?
3 minutes and 29 seconds.
3 minutes and 29 seconds. How many seconds are in a minute?
60.
60, very good. And 29 is very close to half a minute then, right? What's half of 60 is? 30. And that's just 1 away from 29. So we have 3 minutes, 1, 2, 3. And then you tell me how much further I go. Say stop when I get it. Stop. So almost half here. And now I have to take these 2 points and see where they meet. If I go straight up from this point, and I go straight over from this point, they will meet right here. I will draw in a little star here, and that would be for my data point from group B in my data sheet. So I'm making a little B there. And now I do that with all of these different sea stars. So the next one is, can you read it to me?
2.6.
And turnover time?
1 minute and 43 seconds.
Ooh, we had half a minute has 30 seconds. So can you tell me when to stop here?
Stop.
About there, okay. So I go up from there, I come over from here, and this is group C. And now I want you to draw your sea star on here. Can you do that? So you go up 3.2, and then you go over 3 minutes and 34 seconds. Very good. And go up from there. Ooh, keep going straight. Start from there and go along the line. There you go. And where they meet, hang on, keep going along the line, straight. Yeah, and when these two meet, that's where you put your star. And you were group A. You can put an A next to your star. Awesome, good job. And while you are here, let's just start with your modeled sea star. Now first you want to use your pink color, right? And your modeled sea star was 14 centimeter average arm length. So can you go up 14 on the y-axis? Where is that? Find the 14 on the y-axis. There you go. And then you go over 22 minutes and 5 seconds. Hang on. Am I there yet? Where are 22 minutes? This is 1 minute, right? 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
4, 5, 6, 7. It's all the way over there.
It's outside of our picture. Okay, we're gonna leave that there for now and do all the other ones. Let's both of us do one. You do group B, and I'll try group C. How's that? Can we do that? If you're doing this on a piece of paper at home, you can use a ruler to help you stay in a straight line coming over. All right. Okay, so now we have a picture of all our data points and what our sea stars were doing. So first of all, we want to look for patterns. We want to look for something that we can see here. Now the first thing I see is here are all our 6-arm sea stars. And if I want to draw a circle around my modeled sea stars, it is this big, and I'm not going to draw on the wall, but it's actually even bigger than that. So when you look at these two clouds with all our data points in them, what do you notice?
That one is bigger.
That one is bigger, meaning they are way all over the place, all over the graph, much bigger, spread out. What does that mean?
So they're bigger and they're slower.
They're bigger and slower than these. Yes. So if we look at our graph, if we imagined we'd cut it into 4 sections. If I had a sea star that's very small and very fast, which section would it be in? Let's call this one section 1, this is section 2, this is section 3, and this is 4. In which section would you find a small and fast sea star?
Section 1.
Okay, if it's small,
Oh, no, section
3. If it's small, you don't go up very far on the y-axis, right? What is section 1? It would be a
big sea star.
big sea star, but it would be fast, right? Not very much time. If I had a big and slow sea star, where would I find that?
Section 2.
Big and slow. And look, we have 2 sea stars in there, and actually our sea star is kind of in there too, even though that's a little bit outside of the picture. So big and slow. Now, what about these 2? Are they big?
Yeah.
Not as big as these, but pretty big, bigger than these, not as big as these. So they're kind of big. And are they fast or slow?
They're slow.
They're slow. Big numbers here, right?
Yeah.
In the time. And what about B?
The fastest.
That's the fastest and smallest one of the model sea stars, right? So remember your prediction, which sea stars would be the slowest and which ones would be fastest?
Remember the small ones that would be fast, the big ones would be slow.
So you did a pretty good prediction here. Your picture shows that. The smaller sea stars are also faster. What about C?
It's a little smaller.
It's a little bit smaller, but it was also slow. Our model sea stars are a little bit all over the place, and we have one that's even outside of our picture. Anytime a data point is very, very far outside of all the other data points, we call it an outlier. Our sea star was an outlier. Now, what do you think would be the cause for one sea star to take a long, long time, even though all the other ones of the same species could turn over faster? What could be the cause of that? Can you imagine?
Maybe it was older or bigger.
Maybe it's older or bigger. Well, we know it's big, but it's not bigger than E. Maybe it's older. Can you think of other reasons why an animal wouldn't move so fast?
Sick?
It could be sick. Maybe we did something differently because we didn't do all these at the same time. When you do an experiment, you want to treat every animal exactly the same way. So what we did here, using a different experiment and then trying to replicate it today, may have caused us to have a little bit warmer water, or maybe at a different time of year, sea stars turn over faster or slower. I don't know that. We noticed today that one of our sea stars was spawning. That might affect turnover time as well. What about our 6-armed sea stars? What do we notice there?
They're all pretty fast.
They are all pretty fast. They are all almost the same size, right?
Yeah.
They are really close together. So they are all bunched up. Now, which one is the biggest of the 6-armed sea stars? A. And which one is the slowest of the 6-armed sea stars? It's also A.
Yeah.
It's hard to see here, but it's also A. So A is the biggest and slowest in the 6-armed sea stars. Which one is the smallest?
Probably D, E, and F.
D, E, F are all the same size. And which one is the fastest? They're very close together, but D is the fastest. So again, we have sort of a trend that the larger ones are slower and the smaller ones are faster. Okay, thank you. That was a great data analysis. You did an awesome job.